Honestly, women in spooky houses and beautiful gowns and maybe ghosts is probably just my favorite thing, period. Hello, fellow book nerds. This is Gabby, and today we have a recommendations video, which we've not done in a while, and I am so excited because the topic is an amazing genre. So we're going to be talking about Gothic novels. I'm going to recommend you some, and we're going to have so much fun because I love this genre. I love it in movies, I love it in books, I love it in, I don't know, graphic novels, anything. I just love it. I mean, like a beautiful gown and a scared woman running through the forest. Not forest, the mansion. And like the Gothic period was just gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. This is such a random thing, but if you're ever in Portugal, near Lisbon, there's this place called Sintra, and they have just the most gorgeous Gothic mansion that's filled with like these creaking, weird passages. It's so weird. I love it so much. So, a random wreck. But let's get into the books. So first I thought it'd be fun to understand what is Gothic novels and talk to you about my favorite, mostly modern Gothic novels. And Gothic fiction, according to Wikipedia, so you know it's legit, sometimes called Gothic horror in the 20th century, is a loose literary aesthetic of fear and haunting. The name is a reference to Gothic architecture of the European Middle Ages, which was characteristic of the setting of early Gothic novels. Gothic fiction is characterized by an environment of fear, the threat of supernatural events, and the intrusion of the past upon the present. Gothic fiction is distinguished from other forms of scary or supernatural stories, such as fairy tales, by the specific theme of the present being haunted by the past. So it's all about present being haunted by the past. By the past? It's by the past. So we're gonna get into the regs. I'm very excited. I have 9 books, and most of them, like I said, are modern Gothics, new releases, but I do have a sprinkling of some classics that I actually do think are worth it. Okay, so the first book is one that's like quintessential for me, let's call it, and it's Mexican Gothic by Silvia and Moreno-Garcia. So in this book we follow a woman who gets a disturbing letter from her cousin. The cousin married a man and moved away to this like kind of remote mansion somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and now like couple months in, her cousin, the main character, gets like a letter that's like, they're keeping me captive here, I can't escape, the walls are talking, like all kinds of crazy crap. So the main character's father is like, you gotta go, you gotta help out your cousin, we need to figure out what's up, and does she need to go to a mad asylum because she sounds crazy. So the main character goes and meets the family, so like the fiancé's or the husband's family, and it's the story of slowly unraveling madness in this house that's just super creepy. It's set in Mexico, and you can just feel the atmosphere. I mean, it's so rich, it's so gross, and there's like fungi, so if you're not into that, I'm not, but the book was amazing. It has this really good element of tension all the way throughout the book that just builds and builds and builds, and you really like getting amazing vibes from it. So I really love it, and the whole thing was just so deliciously creepy. I love that it was set in Mexico, so it was like a little bit different, and it had the cultural nuances of the time as well. It was amazing. I love this one, but it's a pretty common recommendation, so you probably know about it, but it needed to be first and it needed to be mentioned because it's just so good. Next up is a book that I'm actually in the middle of reading. I am quite literally 56% in, but I felt like I couldn't make this video and not mention it because at least so far the vibes are immaculate. So this is the Hacienda by Isabel, Cañas. So in this book we follow a young woman whose father got killed in the Mexican independence wars, and she and her mother are kind of left desolate with nothing, having to like beg from their cousins, and she meets this man called Rodolfo who has a hacienda, is a don and patron, and he proposes to her. He's like, you can be the donna of my house, you can, you know, have ownership of this. And she's like, yes, I need a house. I need a house for me and my mother. I need a security. Like, I'm an unmarried woman from bad family. I don't have that many prospects. It's also set in Mexico, and the backdrop is the Mexican Independence War. And she moves to this kind of remote village. Again, this beautiful hacienda kind of fell into disrepair and is just looking a little bit rough. So she's like, it's okay, it's a fixer-upper, we can help. And weird things are happening, and she starts hearing voices and seeing things that disappear the next minute. So it's just like, are these ghosts? What's happening? And she enlists a help of a local priest who she hopes can help her with some kind of exorcism or something, because she's like, this house haunted. Period. So, like I said, I'm only halfway through this book, so like check back my vlog when I'm reading it will come out in a week, so you can check back in. But I love this book so far. The atmosphere, the writing is so exquisite and rich and very descriptive, which I love. And you can just feel the uneasiness and terribleness. It's actually moving really fast, and like it's actually quite scary. I would say Mexican Gothic things that happened were like disgusting and disturbing, but I wasn't like scared or anything. But this one, you really get a feeling that these are malevolent spirits that are trying to get her. So that was just making it more exciting to read. I really love it. Again, love that it's set in Mexico. It's just so much culture, and you can feel like the issues of like castes, and how, you know, coloring and colorism, how it impacted people so much back then, and how important it was, and I mean still a problem right now. But yeah, it's gorgeous so far. I'm really loving it. I thought I'd include it just in case, but tune in to hear what I'm actually thinking once I finish the book. Next up is another from a Latina author. So this one's called Weep, Woman, Weep, by Maria DeBlassie, and the full title actually is Weep, Woman, Weep, a Gothic fairy tale about ancestral hauntings. So definitely Gothic, ancestral hauntings. But this one, we follow a woman, a girl really. It's kind of a shorter story. It's like, I would say, more like a novella, but we follow a girl who grew up in this really small village, and she believes in this story of La Llorona. And La Llorona is a malevolent spirit who comes and kidnaps women. In this story, kidnaps women and kind of gives them back, but like drowned women. So it's like stripping them of any kind of independence and creativity and thought, and just pulls out these like husks that just become wives. And it's kind of a story from her being a young woman to her growing up in that place and kind of finding her voice and freedom and ability to break out of the pattern, and the impact of change and places going through change, and I guess gentrification, but a little bit in a good way, modernizing. It's just a very, very interesting book that no one talks about, or if they do, not enough, because I've not heard about it. I keep screaming about it. It's such a good book. Again, it was so short but so impactful, and you just really get the sense of the main character and her strength, and it's beautiful story that I really love and would 100% recommend. Next up, we have The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. So in this one, we follow a woman who really kind of wants independence, but it's in like the 1900s England, so she only has really two choices: marry or be desolate. So she finds this man who's a doctor, and he's like, oh, I don't really want to get married, I'm not looking for marriage. But she's like, how about we make this like a business arrangement? I will do your books, I will be the perfect wife, I will stay out of your way. Basically, we can just kind of stay out of each other's ways, but you'll have a wife, I'll have somewhere to stay, so it's like a good beneficial relationship for both of us. And he's like, okay, we can get married, but you can never go back to my ancestral home. And from there, we kind of get a story of insanity unfurling. I mean, you know, you've got the creepy houses, you've got the hauntings, possible hauntings, it's got supernatural elements. I would say this book was super strong. For about 70% of it, it was just bam, the tension, the characters, the romance, everything was giving. Like, it was just sucked me in. I was about to read this in one go. And then towards the 30-ish%, the latter percent, I feel like it just started meandering, and it was like the same thing over and over. And it's like, yes, it's insanity, but I mean, I guess definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But we were kind of like there and then, and that kind of lost the steam for me. And towards the end, it didn't have that emotional catharsis or whatever that maybe Mexican Gothic did have. But it's still a really good novel. I would still really recommend. It was fun, and I am very curious to read more from the author and see whether the ending bits gets a little bit more fleshed out, a bit more, I guess, to my liking. It's also a preference. So just for me, the last bit didn't work, but it was really good otherwise and had really good vibes. Oh, and I made a video about it, talking about what it's a perfect modern Gothic. So check it out if you're interested. So next up we have Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. So this one is a retelling of, oh my god, Jane Eyre. It's a retelling of Jane Eyre, but I think it's set in Ethiopia, if I'm not wrong, but I could be wrong. But it's we follow this girl who's a debtor, I think that's like the word for like a magical exorcist in this world, and her job is to go to houses and exorcise them and get rid of malevolent spirits. And she takes in a job in this old mansion that already had like bajillion debtors refuse, and I think his name's Mr. Rutford or whatever the hell the main love interest in Jane Eyre name is. And she goes to this house and tries to figure out what's haunting them and trying to free this man of the ancestral curse. Really strong book, really strong man-child vibes, but I kind of enjoyed it. It was a really fun ride. The writing was really, really well done. It was really tense and fun and scary as well. The audiobook was done pretty well. I had a really good time with it. I think it just had the tension of the Gothic, and it was like this house was old and English looking and decrepit, and then outside it was like blistering hot, and it was just like the juxtaposition of this, and it was really like a romance story as well. It all moved super quickly, so that's a problem for you, but it wasn't really like, we just wanted to get to the romance and then we could kind of unfurl from that. And again, I've not read Jane Eyre, so maybe it's very accurate. But I did do a whole video that talked about 5 reasons for reading this book, so you could check that out. But it was really good Gothic vibes, really, really fun protagonist and story, and it was scary. It was like everything you might want, so check it out. Next up we have House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. So this book is actually a retelling of 12 Dancing Princesses, which I think probably originally was like a fairy tale, but I know it because I watched Barbie and 12 Dancing Princesses, and you know what, this was a pretty good Gothic version of that. So I think we follow 12 sisters, I'm assuming, and they live in this decrepit mansion in the seaside, and they keep dying, and I think the whole book is like trying to figure out why the sisters are dying. I read this a while ago, but I still remember how creepy it was, how good it had this feeling of like moisture, but like something being moist. Like it just felt gross and moist. And that was perfect because we were in the seaside town that was like falling apart and everything was kind of gross, kind of like just out of whack. And that really was conveyed because I had like the heebie-jeebies. I was like, oh, why is everything so gross? But it was a good time, and I would recommend. From what I remember, it was pretty good, but it's been a while. Next book is Horrid by Katrina Leno. So this is actually a modern, like actually properly modernly set Gothic, I would say, which I guess Weep Woman Weep also kind of is, but this one feels distinctly modern. So we follow a mother and a daughter who move from California, I want to say, just to the mother's ancestral home, and the main character starts, hearing voices, and there's this room that weird sounds are coming from, but when she opens it, it's like nothing there, and it's just like this feeling of creepiness was really well conveyed. I really loved it. I think the ending was super creepy, super disturbing, and kind of abrupt, but it was like perfect for the book. I had a really good time with it. I thought it was written so well. It was really funny because I listened to the audiobook on script and it just stopped. Like 80% in, just kind of stopped, and I had to finish the rest of the book like reading physically because the audiobook just stopped. So that was weird. But overall, it was a good time, and pretty sure it's a pretty short book as well. So at least, it's like not a long commitment, but definitely the creepy vibes were there. And one of the more disturbing ones in terms of like the ending and stuff. So I think it done a really good job. I had a good time with it. last two books I wanted to mention were actually classics. So first one is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So surely you don't need me to tell you what Frankenstein is. I mean, obviously we have a story of a scientist called Dr. Frankenstein and his creation, which is the monster, Frankenstein's monster, because Frankenstein is the doctor. Um, but I actually read the book for extended essay. If you ever did IB, International Baccalaureate, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it was a school essay that I needed to write, and I wanted to. I talked about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is another Gothic novel, which was pretty good. But I also read Frankenstein and kind of took the comparisons and like all that kind of stuff. And Frankenstein, I was so surprised, but it was so good and so readable. It's still such a poignant story about like a monster and like humans like playing with nature and then kind of nurture versus nature. It was very interesting. It was such a good time. It was so well written, and it really stood the test of time because I didn't feel like I was reading like this old stuffy classic or anything like that. I felt like I was reading like a really interesting modern novel with maybe a little bit of archaic language, but it was so good. I'd really recommend, like, if you're gonna read any classic Gothic classic, I would say Frankenstein holds up 100%, and it still has so many interesting conversations. And the last book I wanted to mention is Northanger. I picked up Persuasion. Let's go again. Okay, there we go. Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So this book is I think the first ever book by Jane Austen, not first to be published, but first to be written. And this is funny because it's kind of like a parody of the Gothic genre. So it's kind of like a little fun bonus if you're really into Gothic novels, like I am, and hopefully so are you since you're watching this video. I would say this was a really good fun. We follow a young girl who's super into novels, and like by the time she lives, the novels that are very popular, kind of Gothic romances that are super dramatic. It's like body ripping, like bodice ripping, all that kind of stuff, and ghosts and all that. And she meets this young man who's like all very dashing, and he's got this his father has this abbey called Northanger Abbey, and it's this old Gothic mansion, and she gets invited there because she's like a friend. She just starts imagining the craziest things. They're like making all these assumptions, running around, like fainting, super dramatic. And it's kind of like Jane Austen poking fun at like the Gothic genre and like the dramatic heroine women that are just like so up. Like, it's just really fun. Catherine Morland is the protagonist, and she's just like so young and naive and doesn't really know anything and is just so easily persuaded, and it's really fun time. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I think I read it as her first novel or maybe second after Pride and Prejudice. I had a good time with it, and I think then watching like an adaptation of it just added a layer as well, because I just realized that it's all very, very, very sarcastic, and I love that. Okay, those are all the Gothic books that I wanted to talk to you about. I feel like this video took longer than I anticipated, but I guess I just cannot shut up about Gothic books. I really, really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, if you could comment, like, and subscribe, I really, really appreciate it. Let me know what's your favorite Gothic novel. Do you have any recs for me? I will take them gladly. I'm always on the lookout. But that's it from me, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!